Hi, everyone. This is Joni McGarry. Thank you so much for tuning in. Before we get to the show, I'd like to say a few words about a company called Crowd Health. I recently became a member of Crowd Health after I broke up with my health insurance company. I no longer wanted to participate in a system that was overpriced, inefficient, customer hostile, and just didn't work. So I joined Crowd Health as an alternative. Crowd Health isn't insurance, it's a platform and a community that empowers their members with a crowdfunding tool and resources to efficiently manage your healthcare cost. Health members pay a nominal monthly membership fee, and then once a month, you're asked to fund another member's healthcare expenses. There is a maximum ask per month, and you know upfront when you join exactly what that will be. And most months, it's less than that. And it's entirely voluntary. I'm saving literally thousands of dollars in premiums, and I feel quite secure that should something happen to me that triggers a medical bill, a large medical bill even, the community will have my back. Crowd Health's track record in that regard is superb. 99.9% of all bills submitted to the group have been funded since it was founded nearly 5 years ago. It's not for everyone. You have to be under 65 and relatively healthy, but it might be for you or for somebody that you know. Learn more about it at joincrowdhealth.com and make sure you use the code JONI, JONI, to save on your first 3 months of membership. There's also a link in the show notes. All referral fees I get, I'm going to donate to charity. I'm really excited to be part of a growing group of people who are just saying no to a corrupt, broken system. So I hope you'll check it out. And now let's get to the show. I'm speaking today to attorney Bobbie Anne Cox, who has been practicing law in New York State for 25 years. She was called to defend the rights of people who lost their rights during the pandemic. If you'll remember, New York was very tyrannical. And she since has been a relentless fighter for constitutional rights in New York State. We talk about the work she's done there and continues to do. And we talk about the state of the political landscape in New York and why the 2026 elections are of vital importance there to restore more of a two-party rule to the state. It's become increasingly one party at the state house level. We talk about the influence of New York City and how it steers state policy, even though most of the rest of the state does not share the city's politics. It was a great conversation, and Bobbie Anne Cox is an example of one person standing up and making a big difference. I was inspired by our conversation, and I hope you will be too. So let's get to it. I'd like to welcome Bobbie Anne Cox to the show. Welcome, Bobbie. I am so glad to see you again, and I'm glad to have you on. So thank you so much for doing this.
Yes, thanks for having me, Joni. It's good to be here.
Yes, I am especially interested in your work because you are in my beloved home state of New York State. I grew up there and it has a special place in my heart, and I would love to move back there. But at this point in time, the landscape there, is just, I think, very challenging, especially politically and in the governance area completely. So you are somebody who's been on the ground fighting for liberty and for the government to do the right thing there for a while now. So could you tell us, like, what your practice is about? You're a lawyer. How you started to focus your attention on the work you're doing now? Give us a little background.
Sure. So I've been practicing law here in New York State for over 25 years now. And I originally started working in a law firm in New York City. And then I left that firm after a few years and I opened my own law practice, which for many years just was really focused on real estate based law. So property taxes and transactions of buying and selling property
Hmm.
and whatnot. And then when COVID hit in 2020, my my world kind of shifted organically because with the lockdowns in particular, which were very strict in New York
Yes.
City,
Yes, they were.
especially. Um, People had their businesses shut, they had schools closed, they had anything that the governor of New York at the time, which was Andrew Cuomo, anything he deemed, unessential,
Hmm.
not essential, was shut down for months on end. So people started reaching out to me at that point and saying, what do I do? I mean, I can't pay my rent. I can't.
Mhm.
My business is shut down, or they couldn't pay their mortgage because they weren't allowed to go to work, or they had to close their small business. And then you had parents that were so stressed out because their kids were now home, and the parents are trying to work if they were
Mhm.
able to work remotely instead
Mhm.
of going out. But how are you able to work remotely from your home when you have 2 or 3 kids running around the house that you're
Mhm.
supposed to be homeschooling?
Mhm.
Because, it was horrendous. People were upset and stressed and didn't know what their rights were. And so it kind of turned into me, speaking out and trying to educate people that, look, first of all, the government can't do this. The governor cannot tell you that you have to stay in your house all day. The governor cannot tell you that you have to wear a mask on your face. There was so much government overreach going on.
Mhm.
um, and so it just morphed into, me giving speeches, attending events, and I was the keynote speaker, or I was on the panel, and I was one of the legal experts on a
Mhm.
panel. And people wanted to know what were their rights, how could they deal with these lockdowns and the school closures and the forced masks and the forced vaccines and all this stuff.
Mhm.
Um, and then in 2020, the beginning of 2022, I brought a lawsuit against the governor of New York State. Uh,
Who was
Kath-
then yeah, is it Hochul or Hochul? I can never know that.
yeah, Hochul is what
Yeah,
we say here in New
okay.
York, so I'm guessing that's right.
So you brought a lawsuit against her in 2022.
Yep, 2022, Department of Health. We sued her and the Department of Health, and we sued over her quarantine regulation. So, they issued a regulation that said basically the Department of Health could force you to either stay locked down in your house, or they could remove you from your house and put you into detention facility and keep you there for as long as they wanted. And if you wanted to regain your freedom, you had to do so by hiring a lawyer to try to sue your way out.
So let me just back up a minute because people will say, well, that's cuckoo. That could never happen. Um, but they actually had a law on the books that would enable them to do this. Is that the case?
Well, it was a regulation.
Okay.
So we do have a quarantine law.
Okay.
It's from 1953. And it's full of due process protections. The law that we've had for 70 years, um, says if you are someone with a communicable disease, and it's been proven not just that you have the disease,
Mhm.
but it's been proven through investigation and a trial, before a judge,
Mhm.
that you are either intentionally harming other people, or you just don't have the ability to control yourself and you're
Mhm.
harming other people.
Mhm.
um, then the judge can issue a quarantine order, and that order would be to put you into a hospital facility to get better, right?
Mhm.
To get treatment for whatever your illness is, and so that you could get better and then, be put back into society freely.
So there were
Uh,
some standards and regulations around that were already on the books.
yeah, the law was already in place. What Hochul did with the Department of Health is they came along and they wrote a regulation, which means it's just something issued by the Department of Health. It did not go through the New York State
And
legislature.
these are unelected officials by and large. They're appointed.
100%.
Yeah. Okay. So
100%. The way it works is the governor gets to appoint who runs each department, right? So the governor says, "This is who I want to run the
mhm.
Department of Health." And then the person who's running the Department of Health, hires the people to work for them. So
Mhm.
all of those people in agencies, not just in New York, this is
Right.
standard.
Right.
Um, all the people working in agencies are bureaucrats that they do not get elected by the people. So, they gave themselves this tremendous power to basically override what the law says,
Mhm.
and just start locking people up if they thought maybe you had a communicable disease. They didn't even have to prove you were sick.
And where were they gonna put these people? Were there facilities underway?
They didn't even need to build facilities. The regulation they wrote said that they could use any building and turn it into a quarantine facility. So it
Mhm.
could have been a multifamily house. It could have been a jail, because at the time they were emptying the jails in New York saying, oh, well, jails spread COVID. So we just need to start releasing the prisoners.
Right.
Right. So it's really uh, stunning that, first of all, that they even thought this up and implemented it. But when you do something like this and nobody challenges you,
Mm,
you give yourself a power you're not supposed to have. And if no one stands up and pushes back against you, you get to keep the power,
right.
right?
Yeah.
So it's
But you learned about it and you stood up. I mean, I think a lot of people probably didn't even know that this was happening or if that it was possible. And I think in part because our media, who should be eagle eyes on this and covering it and screaming it from the rooftops, don't cover things like this.
no.
So this regulation came into effect, and then you sued. What happened then?
Yes, I sued. My plaintiffs in that case were New York State legislators, Senator Borrello, Assemblyman Tague, and Assemblyman Lawler, who's now Congressman Lawler, and a citizens group called Uniting New York State. And we won. The judge struck down the regulation, said it was unconstitutional on multiple levels.
Hmm.
Um, the governor appealed, of course, because tyrants don't like to be told no.
Hmm.
Um, and the appellate court, which is a panel of appointed judges, they're appointed by governors, not elected by the people,
Hmm.
overturned our win. And then we appealed
Hmm.
and we went, or we tried to go to the state's highest court, and they would not hear the case. So,
Hmm.
as it stands today, the regulation does not exist anymore. We did get it struck down. But because the appellate court ruled in the governor's favor, it just means that the governor could now reissue that regulation if she wants.
And on what basis did they strike it down? Because it sounds like it is unconstitutional. It sounds like there's already a law in place should a dangerous situation arise.
Yeah.
What was the ruling based on? The overturning?
They said that my plaintiffs, these sitting New York State legislators, and this citizens group, they said none of them had standing to sue, which just means they didn't think they had the right to sue because they hadn't been injured, which is completely untrue because the theory that we sued under was not that this was unconstitutional because you can't take people's rights and, just throw them into quarantine facilities without due process. That was not our argument. Our argument was based on separation of powers. And we said the governor and her agency don't have the power to change a law.
Ah,
And
and so the
this
legislators would have standing in that case, and the
of
citizens
course,
would.
of
Yeah.
course, of course. But the courts in New York State are compromised. They are activist judges, which we're seeing more and more across the country, right? These
Mhm.
judges that want to impose their views
Mhm.
on the people. And so they come out with these rulings that are against the Constitution,
Mhm.
but they're doing it anyway. So, yeah, so that's where we are with that case. But, what that then did was kind of, uh, vault me into the spotlight of so many different groups in New York State who had formed over those years, and even groups that had been these grassroots groups that had been in place for a decade or so
Mhm.
before COVID. Um, had been following that case and obviously rooting for me because they didn't want the governor to have this horrible power.
Yeah, because it wouldn't be just in this instance, it would be, become broader and broader because it always does.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It always, you start small and then they take a little more
Yeah,
and then they take a little more. And then before you know it, you have no
no
rights left,
rights. Yeah,
right?
exactly. So now you're in
So,
the spotlight.
right. So then I started doing other projects that were pushing back against the New York State government, um, in the name of protecting the citizens, protecting the Constitution. Um, I think the project right after that was the redistricting. The New York State legislature is
It's a super majority too, since 2019, which is a particular kind of landscape, which is
yeah,
difficult to fight, but go on.
yeah, New York State legislature. You're 100% right. Uh, Super majority Democrat controlled. The Senate now has, I think they're one seat away from supermajority, but it's still a majority.
Mhm,
And basically, what happened was the Democrats were going to redistrict our congressional lines. So that means that they were going to redraw the maps
mhm.
in New York State, and they were going to gerrymander so that they could get rid of more Republican votes, more Republican seats in the House of Representatives. So, um, what we did was I teamed up with former Congressman Lee Zeldin,
Mhm.
and he had just run against Hochul in 20. Sorry, Lee Lee Zeldin had just run against Hochul in 2022 for
And
governor.
it wasn't like it was a close race, right? I mean, it was somewhat close. I
It
mean,
was.
people were hopeful he might win.
He lost by, less than 400,000 votes. So, in a state that has, 19 million people,
Yeah,
he came pretty close.
yeah.
But I think the main takeaway from that battle, he and I basically teamed up and we started, sounding the alarm. We did a lot of press conferences around the state, I did, and he did, interviews, TV interviews, radio interviews, podcast interviews, talking about this illegal redistricting that they were planning to do. And
What made it illegal?
because you're not supposed to redistrict in the middle of the decade.
Ah,
So,
oh, okay.
yeah,
So it was pretty clear that the timing itself was illegal.
yeah, right.
People are so
done
brazen.
they had done a redistricting in, so you're supposed to have the census every 10 years.
Mhm,
So they had done the census in 2020, and then you would redistrict thereafter. So
mhm,
basically, by 2021, you would have these new maps,
mhm,
based on the data that you collect from the census.
mhm.
Um, and we were in 2023 when we were fighting against the redistricting. So, um, anyway, we ultimately did win that fight. The Democrats, because of the pressure that we were putting on them in the public arena,
Mhm.
the Democrats backed down and they really didn't change the lines much at all. Um, and then right after that, we fought another battle, which was 2024 against Prop One, which
Yeah,
was,
tell us more about that. That was really something.
yeah. So, um, Congressman Zeldin and he actually is now the head of the
Of the
EPA.
EPA, yeah.
So he's in Trump's cabinet now. But at the time, this was in 2024 before the election, leading up to the election. Um, Congressman Zeldin and I were speaking out against and campaigning against Prop One, which was this proposed change to the New York State Constitution that the Democrats were pushing. They said it was about enshrining the right to an abortion in the Constitution of the state. But that's not what it was about. And for anybody that took the time to read the proposed language, they would have seen that the word abortion didn't even appear in there. Um, so it was really about restricting the rights of New Yorkers and giving the New York State government the ability to discriminate against New Yorkers, as long as they were doing so in the name of reversing a past discrimination or preventing a future discrimination. So this was a Trojan horse. I mean, the the language of the first part of Prop 1 said, in essence, um, you shall not, you cannot discriminate against anyone based on, I think it we already had race, religion, color, and creed. That was already in our Constitution.
Mhm.
We're adding in like 10 or 11 new categories of things you could not discriminate against. And it was things like people's national origin, uh, which then would open the door to giving, you know, people not born in our country that are now in our country the same rights as New Yorkers,
Mhm.
which could include the right to vote. Um,
I mean,
these
people who are not citizens.
right,
Right, yeah.
right. So
Mhm.
that would have been their next argument. Well, now it's in the Constitution that you can't discriminate based on someone's national origin, meaning where they came from.
Right.
But now that they're here in New York State, we're going to give them the same rights as everybody else. They were laying the groundwork, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so they said you can't discriminate based on national origin, somebody's sex, sexual identity, gender expression. They put in all these categories of how you can't discriminate
Mhm.
people. Um, you can't discriminate based on age, which sounds really good because we don't want people being discriminated against because all of a sudden they're a senior citizen or
Right, yeah. I mean, all of this sounds very good. Who wants to, on the surface, we wanna be a free, fair, and open society.
right, right. But you have to think of
Yes.
what they really want to use it for because if you are aware about how politics works, you know that what they say, especially when it sounds grandiose and really warm and fuzzy,
Mhm.
is usually not for the benefit of the people. It's
Right,
usually a power grab somewhere,
right. Or
you
even
know?
if it's not originally like, even if people doing it have the best of intentions, which I don't think they do, things can be used later. Like, how will it be used later?
Right.
So, there what happened with Prop 1?
So we campaigned the entire year, all of 2024. Same kind of thing, crisscrossing the state, giving press conferences here and there, doing, writing articles, doing media interviews and whatnot. And unfortunately, it ended up passing because the Democrats just had this lie of a message and they kept
Mhm.
screaming abortion, abortion. And it passed, and now it's part of our Constitution. And
And, let me also point out because I remember this, on the ballot, the way they put it on the ballot was, disingenuous. It was, a little it was dishonest. How did it appear on the ballot that if somebody hadn't, learned about Prop 1, what did it look like to a voter?
right, so they didn't put the language that was going into the Constitution on the ballot. What voters in New York saw was a summary, a very short summary, a couple sentences long. Um, and how they got away with that, and that the language that you saw on the ballot was very warm and fuzzy. I mean, it was
Mhm.
something like, if you don't want discrimination against people for these various things, vote yes. If you do want discrimination against people for these various things, then vote no. So obviously
Sure. I mean, who wouldn't
everybody
just check
wants,
that? Yeah.
right, everybody wants to be, like you said, fair and live freely, and so the majority of New Yorkers who just read the language said, "Oh, this sounds good," and said
Mhm.
yes, right?
Mhm.
But what the Democrats did was the year before, they passed a law that said when there is going to be a ballot proposal, uh, and on a change, like this was a change to our constitution, um, they didn't have to show you the real language that was going to go into the constitution. They could show you just a little summary that was limited in how many words could
Mhm.
be in that summary. Um, and so they said, we can just show you a summary and then you vote on the summary of what actually is going to go into the Constitution. So they gave themselves the power to basically hide things from the public
Mhm.
because who do you think determines what that language says? I mean, they do, right? They get to draft the summary
Mhm.
of
Mhm.
the language. So it's really disingenuous. It was so upsetting, and I had people for months after the election, I had people reaching out to me and saying, "Oh, I didn't know
Right.
that that's what Prop 1 was about. I
Yeah.
wish I if I had known, I wouldn't have voted for it," and then
Right.
some people were, "Can we bring a lawsuit? Can we" "They lied to us, they
Mhm.
deceived us, can we get this reversed?" No, you cannot. It is in the Constitution now.
So once something's in the state constitution in New York, you can't get it out?
Well, you have to go through the same process you went through to get it in.
And you
Uh,
would need a whole different legislative body.
yeah. Y
Which brings me to, like, what we talked about a little bit leading up to the show. There are a lot of elections coming up, and, there's a majority. Like, it still surprises me, and I don't know why it should, but, how blue the state has become. And
not if
also
you
I
not if you
not
look
if
at a
you
map.
right.
If you look at a map of New York State
That's what I meant
and
is in the elections, but yeah, exactly. So talk about that with upstate New York.
it's you look I was just looking at the map the other day for a new project I'm working on. I looked at the results of the 2022 gubernatorial election race. That's when, Congressman Zeldin or EPA Administrator Zeldin ran against Kathy Hochul.
And that was really her first election because she came into office because Cuomo was taken out and she was the lieutenant governor at the time. I
Correct.
just can't believe anyone elected her, but that's my opinion. Go
Yeah,
on.
she like you said, from summer of 2021 when Cuomo stepped down, she rose to governor, and then this was her first election
Mhm,
as governor, right? And if you look at that map, it is all red, meaning most of the count we have 62
mhm,
counties in New York State. Most of those counties voted for Zeldin,
mhm,
and the few counties that she won were New York City, right?
mhm,
'Cause the big cities always tend to go Democrat. Um, the county where Buffalo is,
mhm,
the county where Albany is,
mm,
um, Westchester County also went blue, but my point is that it's the big urban centers that she won,
mhm.
um, but all the rest of the map was red.
Yeah, I grew up in upstate New York, and it's it's not it is that landscape. It is that landscape. So it's unfortunate because I think people upstate, and this is probably true in any state that's anchored by a really big city, they just feel like, why bother? Because the state house ends up just increasingly not representing the state. And that's a bigger argument for another time. So this year, there are a lot of elections coming up. There are primaries in New York. I think they're in June.
Yes.
And tell us, what your view of all that is, what's at stake, what people can do to do so that they feel more represented. Do you think there's any hope that some two parties, if might be restored to some aspects of the state house? Because right, like I live in a town right now where, and it has been for years, everything is one party. It's all Democrat. The city council, the mayor, all that, and no Republicans ever can really. It's rare that they can get elected. At the state level, it's different, but it's always better if you have an actual discussion between people of differing views in a legislative body. So tell me about the upcoming elections. What do you see as being hopeful, not hopeful? Um, what has to
Yes.
be done?
Yes. So, you're completely right with the one-party rule. It is
Either
really
party, it's not good.
Yeah.
It's not good.
No, I say that I've been writing a Substack for probably 4 years now,
Mhm.
and I've written many an article that says, one party rule, no matter the party, is really dangerous, because you do need that other side of the conversation
Mhm.
to make sure everybody's being at least somewhat represented.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but here in New York State, we have a huge election year, huge opportunity this year in 2026 because we have the governor is up for election, attorney general is up for election, our comptroller, our entire New York State legislature, and our meaning our entire New York State Senate. They're all up for election,
Wow.
and the entire New York State Assembly. They're all up for election.
Wow.
Yeah. So we have the opportunity to literally wipe the slate clean and start afresh in New York State.
Are most people who are in office now running for reelection, or are some people stepping down and retiring?
Yeah, well, we also some won't run again, but we have also the congressional elections. So we have House of Representative seats that are up
Mhm.
for election this year in New York, and we have some local elections too. So it's a very big year in New York as far as elections are concerned. So, what's at stake? Well, as I'm sure you know, we just had 2 months ago, we had an election in New York City.
Yeah.
And so now we have a I mean, I really don't want to call him a socialist. He calls himself a socialist, but he really, if you look at his views, he really is communist in his views.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and he's now the mayor in New York
Of
City.
and he's young and inexperienced. It is mind-blowing that he has been either elected or installed in that position.
Yeah.
And yet I'd like to talk a little bit about that too after we talk about the statewide elections, but go on, about
Yeah, well, my point is, what starts in New York City typically spreads,
Mhm.
and Albany usually picks up the crazy ideas that start in New York City and then makes it a statewide law. And the reason for that is because there are so many people in the New York State legislature from New York City, right? It's
Of
the
course, right?
representation is based on population. So
Right.
you have a huge, group of 9 million people in New York City. Of course, they're going to have more representatives going to Albany on their behalf than,
Sure.
let's say, Western New York.
Right.
So, yeah, so we are facing a situation where we have this guy Mondani who has no experience. I mean, he served in a few years in the New York State Assembly, but from what I understand, he missed a lot of that and missed a lot of votes. Um, but he also just has zero experience with something that small. He represented a small area of New York City, and anyway, so now he's mayor. Um, I don't think he had any real job before he was in the assembly. I believe he's in his early 30s,
Yeah, he
34
is.
or something. So he doesn't even have real life experience.
Right.
He's never run a business of his own or worked for a company,
Right.
or he's never gone there, day after day and worked a job. And so it's disheartening because if you don't have that real life private sector experience, or you don't have the experience of being an executive, it's not
He
for the largest city in our country. um it's not a warm feeling. There's no confidence there that this
Mhm.
man has what it takes to run the city in a prosperous manner.
Which actually might be good because his ideas run so counter to American ideas. He seems not to believe in property rights. He seems not to believe in justice, in terms of, keeping good people safe from criminals. it kind of is mind blowing to me that, well, New York fell for it because he was a very charming campaigner. I'm just surprised there weren't enough people in New York with an interest in maintaining their rights that they would, you know, vote for this guy, but whatever. So,
Well, he didn't win by that much. If
yeah.
you look at the numbers, he won by just over 50%. And a lot of his voting base was women from the ages of 18 to 29. So, it's that group of, these are the people that just got out of college. If they went to college, they just got out of college, they have debt.
Mhm.
They're working their tails off
And they can't get
and
ahead.
they can't get ahead. And so they're upset. And
Yeah,
what did he do? He came along and he said, "Well, I'm going to give you free this and free that and free buses and free childcare and free everything." Um, so of course,
sure.
and I'm going to tax the rich to pay for it all.
Yeah,
So you get free stuff. So of course, those
sure.
young voters are thinking, "Oh, thank God!
Right.
I get some free stuff. I can try and get ahead."
Yeah, yeah.
So, but it was all a lie. He can't pay for any of that stuff.
It
Of
never
course,
works.
it,
You cannot tax the rich hard enough to pay for everything because they will move out of it just doesn't work. It doesn't work.
yep,
But people keep trying it and it gets people elected, that's for sure.
right. But what's he going to do then? He's going to go to Hochul, right? He's going
Mhm.
to go to the governor and he's going to say, which he already did. Hey, how about you pay for that free childcare I was talking about on my campaign trail, which she just agreed to do. Okay.
Yeah.
So New York City, with their free childcare, is coming from New York State taxpayers because of this horrendous, spineless governor. Um,
Wow.
yeah.
It just makes me so angry because there's so many hardworking people who wouldn't want to fund this kind of thing. I'm all for childcare, but it's just not a right way to do it. So we have him in New York, and then Hochul's up for reelection. Who's running against her? And is there any possibility? Because I glanced at a couple of polls, people keep voting for her. They seem enthusiastic, even though her approval rating was very, very low. Um, who's running against her, and what are the possibilities there?
Yeah. So the Republican nomination, their convention is coming up the beginning of February. So it's almost upon us. We got about 2 weeks.
Hmm. Hmm.
But it is going to be Bruce Blakeman, who is the current Nassau County executive.
Hmm.
And he has a long history in politics. He was on his town council, then he was on the Nassau County legislature. Now he's been county executive since 2022. Um, so he has some really great experience. And he is, I mean, personally, I think he has a great shot because he has stood up for the people of Nassau County with, for example, he stood up against Hochul when she was doing the mask mandates
Hmm.
during COVID, and he stood up against her. He said, "We're not enforcing that here in Nassau
Wow.
County."
Good for
Uh,
him.
he stood up against Hochul with the vax mandates,
Hmm.
and he said, we're not doing that. We're not enforcing that here in Nassau County." And there was a this is a good example. In 2022, they were going to do the state championships for the cheerleading competition. They were going to do it upstate, and the school that was hosting it was saying all the athletes and spectators have to be vaccinated against COVID in order to participate or come watch these sporting event, this championship. Bruce Blakeman stood up and said, "Hey, do you guys want to host your championship here in Nassau County? Because we won't enforce that. You don't have to have proof of the COVID vaccine in order to participate in this sporting event." So ultimately, the university backed down and said, "Oh, okay, we'll get rid of that requirement."
Oh,
And
good.
So,
Because
he
yeah,
was
that's
able to stand up for the people. And he's also been a very loud proponent for girls and women's rights. And they did pass a law in Nassau County that said that any of the county fields or facilities for sporting events, you can only participate on a team that matches your actual at
at birth
birth
sex.
sex.
Yes.
So that is still a big problem for the governor and for our attorney general, Letitia James. They're suing him over that. Um,
It's so anti-woman. I mean, that's a topic for another time, but people think that they're protecting people's rights, but it's so anti-women,
Mhm.
to allow men, and it's I have nothing people should live as they like, but in no world should a woman be, like, competing in sports against a man that's supposed to
Right.
be a woman. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me, and it's such
Right.
a controversial topic for people. I don't understand it, but yeah, so maybe he has a chance. What about in the, Senate, in the, House? Are there enough seats that could flip that would, restore some kind of, dialogue to that body?
So you mean state level?
Yes,
The
yes.
state, yeah. So, the state senate in New York right now, the Democrats have the majority. They're one seat away from being in the supermajority. We need to flip more seats.
Mhm,
Up until 2019, the Republicans had control of the state senate, and in 2018 election, they lost several seats
mhm,
and slipped into the super minority or these past 6 years,
mhm,
7 years. So it's been pretty dangerous with the laws and the policies that are coming out of Albany. So I'm hoping they can flip some
mhm,
seats in the Senate because that is a lot closer, n- uh, uh, a better chance for them to regain control than the Assembly. The
mhm,
Assembly, the Democrats have a large advantage. So we'll see about that. But we also had really important House races. In 2022, New York State was the reason that the Republicans regained control of the House of Representatives. In 2022, we flipped 5 seats from Democrat to Republican here in New York State.
and how does that look this year?
So let's see, four. I'd say 4 of those 5 seats, up until this point, went back to Democrat, and so we just have the one seat is Congressman Mike Lawler. His seat was one of the ones in 22 that flipped to red and he is still in place. So,
Mhm,
the Democrats are gunning for that. They're trying to get that seat back. And, but there are definitely some flippable seats at the congressional level here in New York State. We need a strong top of the ticket because then that helps trickle down um, to the people below, the people that are running for state senate, state assembly, people that are running for Congress. If you have a strong gubernatorial candidate,
yes.
it helps the down ballot. So yes, this is going to be an exciting year
Mhm,
in New York State for elections, and I definitely think that Bruce Blakeman, who's going to be the Republican nominee and the Conservative Party nominee, I think that he has an excellent shot. At, it's just a matter of getting the rest of the state to know him and hear about his record of what
mhm,
he's done in Nassau County.
mhm.
Um, as for the
Particularly people upstate, yeah, because Nassau County's on Long Island.
correct,
Mhm,
correct. That's Long Island, so we need the people of New York City and Hudson Valley and straight up through the rest of the state, central New York, western New York, everywhere. Um, we need them to hear his message
mhm,
and
mhm,
realize that he is a fantastic replacement for
Right.
Kathy Hochul,
Right.
who, Hochul keeps going further and further to the left because, she's going to have a primary challenger in June. Her current lieutenant governor, this guy Delgado, has said that he plans to challenge her.
Wow.
And so she's going to have a primary, it looks like.
Interesting.
Um, and he's very progressive. He's further left than she is.
It's hard to imagine.
So yeah, well,
Well,
it's sad but true.
Well, I think, it's really important that the people of New York understand what's happening because, and we didn't even get to this and we're running out of time, but, did a recent article in your Substack, which I'm going to link to in the show notes, excellent Substack called Knowledge is Power, highlighting that, there's all this fraud being uncovered in Minneapolis. Well, there's a huge amount of fraud in New York City. And until people with a backbone get into office and stand up to this kind of thing and want to change it rather than just funding the slush fund on the backs of all the taxpayers, um, it's just going to rot the whole system. And I think we're well on our way. So, and I have a special affinity for New York State. I want things to get better. So I'm hoping that the candidates you're talking about will succeed in the
Yeah,
elections.
absolutely. I'm praying and pushing for it, and I am happy to be a part of the movement
Hmm.
because it's so important. We especially now that we have this guy Mondani running New York City,
Yeah.
it's really important that we have a governor that can push back on a lot of the policies
Hmm.
and a lot of the money that they're going to be asking
Yeah,
all the
because they'll bleed New York State,
yeah.
and I think people don't realize that, and it's a very good point you make. This like, well, New York City, whatever, but if they're coming to the treasury of New York State to fund the city, then that impacts everybody. I'm going to lead people to your Substack in the show notes. Is there anywhere else that they can find you? Anything that you want to put on radar of listeners to start reading and looking at, especially in New York State?
Yeah, I think that if people want to be, I typically write my weekly Substack about something that is New York centric, but not always. I do
Mhm.
also do national issues, always legal related. So I try to help break down some complex issues and, Supreme Court decisions and stuff like that so that people understand what that means
Mhm.
for them in their daily lives. So I think my Substack is a great resource if people want to go to it's attorneycox.substack.com.
Mhm.
Or you can just go to substack.com and type in Bobbie Anne Cox and my page will pop up. Um, and yeah, my website also has a lot of information on there about the work that I've been doing here in New York State to serve the Constitution, push back against the government overreach. Um, and my website there is www.coxlawyers.com.
Okay.
So another place people can get a lot of information, especially for my media tab, because I have a lot of articles I've written and interviews that I've done and whatnot. So, but yeah, I think if people can stay informed, that's the most important thing.
Mhm.
Channel that into action, right? Get involved with a local race. Get involved with. It doesn't even have to be a local race. I mean, all anybody running for office needs volunteers.
Mhm.
You could be doing phone banking for a candidate in New York if even if you're sitting in, Washington or vice versa, So I think people really in 2026 people really need to get involved,
Mhm.
volunteer, talk about things that are important issues and do your homework on these politicians that are
So important.
it's
So
so important.
important.
Nobody really does that.
Right. Right. And I just want to point out that even though you are New York focused, what happens in New York spreads outside of New York. It's like it's a bellwether. Same with California. things that are it's like a testing ground for certain ideas to be passed and then exported to the rest of the country. So even if you're not a New Yorker, this is still a really good Substack and a good um, body of information to learn how things work. And your work, Bobbie Ann, is you're so brave and you're so relentless, and New York is so lucky to have you. So I'm just thankful for all your work on behalf of my New York growing up self.
Oh,
And, so thank you so much. Before we break, I'm going to ask you what I ask all of my guests, selfishly, because I like to learn. In this age of chaos, division, media onslaught, all of the awful things, how do you stay centered and find some peace and happiness?
yes, that's a great question. I honestly, I like to meditate, take some quiet time, and pray. And I also do, on the physical side, I will go to the gym and do a nice hard workout. It's really important to take care of yourself,
Yes.
physically and mentally. The quiet time, the
Mhm.
meditation, the prayer really helps, I think, center and just we have so much information coming at us
Yeah.
all the time. Like we have phones, we have laptops, we have computers on our desks, we have iPads, there's so much coming at us that we really do need to take a step back and take a deep breath and do something to quiet your mind, even
Mm.
if it's just for a few minutes each day. So it helps me stay focused and recenter. And certainly the going to the gym and getting out all that stress is another big help.
Yeah.
So I hope everybody finds something they can do to
Yes.
help manage their stress in their life.
All great things. Thank you so much for coming on, and keep up the good fight. And maybe after the elections, we'll get together again and do a debrief on how things went.
Yeah, sounds good.